Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, where you are in the world. My name is Heather Townsend, and welcome to our How to Negotiate a Pay Rise webinar. And I am really pleased that I'm running this with Pat Cahill, who is the founder and managing director of the Pro Recruitment Group. And I've worked with the Pro Recruitment Group now, Pat, was it about 3 years we first started working together?
Yeah, I think it's about as long as that, yeah.
Yes. You mean when I was in my 30s, not my 40s? Sadly, that. Yeah, that sort of thing. And, I really rate the guys at the Pro Recruitment Group. They are the good guys, which is why we wanted to run this webinar, because Pat is an absolute expert on how to negotiate a pay rise. Before we get started, I wanted to do just a few quick tech checks. So firstly, for my blood pressure and sanity, can you find the hand symbol and just press it if you can hear me? So Mariana can hear me, Rafik, Harry can hear me, that's brilliant. Michael can hear me, Alison can hear me, that's brilliant. Good that you can all hear me, I really appreciate that. Next thing is, can you just find a question box and just tell me where are you in the world and what time it is? Because we often get a global audience. I wanted to make sure that Pat and I get rid of all our English idioms. So Callum is in Farringdon. So I think we'll be all right with that one. That's one of the team. And where else is other people? Where are you in the world and what time is it? Anil's in Buckinghamshire, so it'll be just coming up to 12:30 for you. Callum is in Northamptonshire, which is brilliant. At the moment, we're exclusively in the UK, which is very unusual for one of my webinars. Looks like that's where everybody's going to tell me they're at. They're in there. We've got Rafik in Germany. I knew that we would have at least one person that's not from the UK. Absolutely half one, so hopefully you've had a nice lunch, Rafik. Josh, it's New York, 7:30 in the morning. Is it as cold in New York as it is over here at the moment, Josh? It's kind of hovering around 0 degrees Celsius at the moment. Yeah, it's freezing for you as well. Michael is in London. Yeah, we've got everyone from literally the four corners of the globe, which is great to have so many people here with us. Fantastic. Now, I'm going to just put up a quick poll, and this it really helps Pat and myself just make sure that we're getting this in the right kind of area and pitching it at the right kind of level. So where are you in your career at the moment? Votes are coming in. Great to see a couple of people I know on the line. Ed, lovely to have you with us again. I wonder are you in London at the moment, Ed? Or are you somewhere on your travels? Lovely to see you as well, Victoria. Great to have you with us. Lovely to see a few people that I know here, which is excellent. So we've got most of the votes there. Let's just close the poll and share the results. And absolutely, so we've got a real mixture, everything from trainees right up to a few partners. Great to have that. So let's just hide the results and let's bring back my screen. So brilliant that we've just done those tech checks. Great to have. So let's kind of get started. What are the objectives of what we're trying to do? Very much. It is what it says it is on the tin. It's how to successfully negotiate a pay rise in your current role or for maybe a new job or role. And who better than to tell us how to do it than the real expert in Pat? How many years did you say you've been recruiting? Is it 30 years, Pat? You've been doing the same?
Less than that, about 18 years plus VAT.
18 years plus about 18 years plus
yeah.
VAT.
Exactly. I can't believe that.
Yeah, I aged you about 10 years. Sorry about that.
That's fine, I can take it.
Absolutely. And we're going to go into a little bit about how men and women approach them differently. But also we're going to give you some of the tactics, such as the 3 things you need to do to prepare before you go in to ask for the pay rise. But, I've just spent the morning talking about pricing and value. And actually, when it comes to your pay, you need to really know the value you bring to your firm. So what's you're really worth. Now, with the best will in the world, you're going to do all the right stuff someday and still get told no. And so Pat's going to take you through how to handle it if your firm don't agree to your pay rise, but also what that really horrible question that comes from a recruiter, what's your current package? You know, there's a way to answer it and there's a way not to answer it. So a lot of you know who I am. I'm the co-author of How to Make Partners So They Have a Life. I've got 4 other books to my name, but I'm also the founder and lead contributor of the How to Make Partner website, which is, I think it might be the only, but it's definitely the leading website for professionals in practice who want to take their career to partner. I'm delighted to be working with Pat. As I've mentioned, he's one of the founders and the managing directors of the Pro Recruitment Group, which was formed in 2007. So Pat runs the day-to-day business, but he also keeps his hand in with recruitment at partner level across several sectors. He has an extensive network of tax, legal, finance, and HR professionals in both practice and in-house, having recruited across several sectors for 20 years. So yes, I got that wrong. So before we get going with the first question, what we'd love to know is, what do you want Pat to answer on this webinar? So put into the question box, what do you want Pat to answer? What's your key question? And we'll make sure that as we go along, we answer those questions. If we don't, we'll pick them up at the end. What's your key question that you want to give Pat? At this point, it goes really quiet, Pat. Everybody starts thinking.
They're all writing these damn difficult questions.
Yes, if you're in Pat's team, it's now time to make his life difficult. Ask those horrible questions. I've not got any questions through yet. I'm just going to give it just a few more moments. And I'm assuming we've got no questions at the moment coming through, Pat. So Pat, very much, please, if you've got a question, just ask it, because I will try and pick it up as we go through. So let's get started, Pat. Why do people think they can't ask for a pay rise? You know, let's start with the easy ones.
I think people still think it's a taboo subject. So I think people often lack that confidence as well. We also get a lot of people thinking it may be the boss's responsibility to raise salary and to push them through their careers, which sometimes it is. It depends on the environment and the company you work in. But really, you've got to manage your career. You've got to manage your salary. You know, you may have a supporter within the business, but it's down to you to really push yourself and make sure that salary, because we're all in this, you know, to earn money, is front and foremost when it comes to what you want at work. Yeah, but I do think it's a lot of people just lack that confidence, and we'll come on into it in a bit, Heather. But when it comes to women, sometimes it depends where they are in the stage of their career. They may have been, a return to work, had a baby, been on mat leave, and sometimes that can put you on a weak footing, and it shouldn't do. Everyone's entitled to ask for a pay rise. But I think, again, some people are too scared. They may wonder what their boss is going to say. They're not sure how it's going to be taken. Is it almost seen as like a fait accompli or a blackmail, which it never is. So, but it's that lack of confidence really is the underlying fact why people don't.
And I think it's really interesting. You touched on something that we see a lot in the club, that people think that their firm will tap them on the shoulder and say, right, we think you need to go up to the next level, or you're ready. And people think their results will do the talking for them. And it's just not the case, is it, Pat?
Well, that's it. I think, I'm a business owner, and I know I've got some of my guys listening in here, but sometimes as a business owner or as a manager or a boss, you're often too busy running the business, doing your own work to stop and think about the staff around you. And it's not because, we're not wanting to give pay rises or push people through their careers. You just get bogged down with the day to day. And sometimes you need someone to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, buddy, listen, we need to talk about salary. We need to talk about career. So, be brave, I would say, in this circumstance.
Yeah. And as one business owner to another, we really value our staff, but very often, as a business owner, you're not thinking, oh, so-and-so needs a pay rise. And it's not because you're being negative or tight-fisted. Far from it.
Yeah.
Absolutely far from it. And it's interesting. We've got a couple of questions that are relevant to this. So given that a lot of people don't think they can ask for a pay rise, somebody's actually asked, how often can you ask for a pay rise? What's your thoughts on that, Pat?
Sorry, could you repeat that last bit again?
Yes, someone has actually said, how often can you ask for a pay rise?
I mean, typically everyone thinks, and I think this is probably fairly standard, it is once a year. So normally when your appraisal comes up, typically if it's year end, it's going to be sort of December or January. But there's no reason why, dependent on the work you do, any time you've done something significant. So it could be a number of times during the year. That's a really subjective question, very very good question. But at least once a year, you should be reviewing your salary, as should your company at the very least.
And it's interesting on that basis, Ting Yan has got a really great question. And I've seen it with so many firms that you have the annual pay rise. You know, the firm only gives rises during April. Is it worth asking prior to that?
Oh, definitely. As I said, dependent on what you're doing for the business. Again, we'll come on to it a bit later about your worth for the business, what you're doing, what's the impact if you weren't there. I don't think you should ever think it should be just once a year. Again, it's a negotiation piece. And again, it will come back to how well you get on with your boss, how receptive they are. So there's a number of factors, but I would say, yeah, never be afraid to ask at a random point in the year.
So we've got another great question that's still relevant to this. And so somebody said, can you ask for a pay rise if you've underperformed? What's your view on that, Pat?
It's difficult. That one, again, it's one of those ones where what are you doing for the business? Is it purely that you're bringing in cash revenue, so it's a fee target? That I think is very difficult if you are expected to hit a fee target. But again, was that target realistic? Was it achievable? If not, and you only performed say 80 or 90%, but it's still a huge amount of revenue you brought in, I think yes, you can. But again, if you're not bringing in fees, you have to look at the holistic situation about what else are you worth to the firm. Are you managing people? Are you sort of running teams? So it really depends on the actual work you're doing as well.
Mm-hmm. Still on this same topic, and a great question from Michael, and I remember in my BDO days, there was a set year pattern, that there was the pay review that would happen before they would then that would be in the summer, and then the pay rises would go through in October, and then there'd be two sets of promotions, one in April, one in October, and it was a fairly regimented. And Michael's asked you, is it not better to ask for a pay rise when or before budgets are being done for the following year in order that it can be factored in?
The straight answer is yes, always do that, because again, as a business owner, we like to have our ducks in a row when it comes to finances. So we'll always budget for what is next year going to look like. But again, let you into a little secret here. We always add in a sort of like a we call it a buggeration factor, for excuse my French here. So any business owner will actually put in a figure where it will be plus or minus sort of like 10 or 15%. So we always will expect during the year to have someone extraordinarily ask for a pay rise, or there's something else we have to pay for in the business. So there's always a little bit of leeway in every business's budget. Yes, it makes sense to ask just before or on budgeting for a pay rise, but never be afraid to ask for it during the year, because as I said, there's always a bit of fat in everyone's budget, which is it counts for these sort of situations. But good question.
Yeah, absolutely, and we call it in our business back pocket money, stuff that you
exactly
away in your back pocket. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, given that you've touched on the fact that there are gender differences between how men and women negotiate or talk on the pay, what are they, and how do we get over that?
Okay, well, again, this question, is there a pay gap between genders? In my experience, no is a straight answer. So we typically recruit into tax, legal, finance, HR, and they have very much set banding. So if you're in a practice, the banding is from X to Y, and regardless of whether you're male or female, you'll fit into that. But there's been some really interesting studies about who asks for pay rises. So the Carnegie Mellon University did a study, and it said that men are 4 times more likely to ask for a pay rise than women. And when they do, they ask for typically 30% more than women. And this is a study they've done. So this is all, again, you can check this out on the website. So women aren't asking as much as often or for as much money compared to men.
And I think this stuff is fascinating, and it often we had a chat with it actually. It was at QB Connect randomly over in San Jose, and actually when it comes down to pay rises, it's often about your expectations. So we were talking about if you're the sole breadwinner of the family unit and you're male, you're far more likely to ask for potentially a bigger raise or have higher expectations of what you need at the end of the day than if you were maybe a part-time female worker who wasn't the main breadwinner. Does that make sense? So often very much it's circumstantial. And we also have the chat that if you don't know what your peers are on, it's very difficult to ask for a pay rise to get in line with them. But it was interesting that you told me that Pat, 20%, research suggests that 20% of women never negotiate at all. So I think there's a key thing here is very much, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you are, think about your pay as very much a start of a negotiation, not the end of a negotiation, very much so. I just want to do a quick poll, and this is relevant for the next question. You know, where are you at the moment? Are you actively looking for a new role? In other words, you're going to have to be negotiating your pay at some point. Are you thinking about it? Are you maybe not looking unless the right role came along, or are you happy in your current role? So where are people at the moment? Let's see the votes coming in. There's a really interesting spread here, actually. Really interesting spread. We're going to get a few more votes. Let's go 3, 2, 1. Any more coming? Let's just close. Let's just close the poll. Let's just share the results. So interestingly, we've got a really, really even spread between where people are in their sort of career at the moment and what they're thinking about in their roles. So let's just hide the results. Let's just get the slides back up. So this is really relevant for the next question for Pat. Are there any differences between negotiating a salary with a new firm or job versus your existing firm or job? What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, there's clear differences. I think when firms are looking to recruit, they obviously have a budget and a banding. And I think the advantage they have is they've got what they would perceive the whole market ahead of them, so they can kind of be fairly rigid in what they're looking for. Because if they don't get that person, they'll wait for the next CV or the next candidate to come along. So it is a bit more rigid, I think, when you are entering a new firm. But again, that's why agencies are so important, because we all have the inside scoop. We all know the different bandings, how much flex there is. And these days as well, firms aren't just looking at the base salary to attract people. There's signing on bonuses, there's flexi time, there's so many other benefits. Again, if you're dealing directly with the company, you may not be aware of, which is where we come in. That's our skill. We know what is on the table from the business. But when you come to looking at yourself as an employee, I think you stand a better chance. Well, you definitely do, because you're a known entity to the business. And this is where you can recognise your worth and work that out. You're on a strong footing to actually negotiate a pay rise. And again, I'm a business owner. It's far more expensive, costly, and a nuisance to hire someone new, bring them in. You've got the agency fees. You've got to see whether that person's going to gel with your business. So from a business owner's point of view, if you're a good employee, we want to keep you, and we want to keep you motivated, and we want to make sure you're engaged. And if you're not engaged, you're not going to perform well. And salary is often a big part of engagement. It's not the only thing, but it's a big part.
Yeah, and absolutely. The work that's coming out about at the moment is a lot of for the sort of way pay is changed. Is that for most people, as long as you're paying a fair day's pay, they're happy. As soon as you go beyond that point, it's no longer a motivator. And there's very much well, actually, if it's a fair day's pay, fair day's work, I'm happy about that. And but absolutely. And it was interesting. I remember when my last corporate ever job before I jumped out was that I'd had a bit of a shaky. I'd been made redundant at Tesco's. I then made a bad career move, left within 3 months, And so I was on slightly shaky ground and got effectively a brilliant job for a little bit more money than I'd been on. And I was absolutely made up. It was amazing. And then I discovered that I was seen as the top performer in the team, and I was paid about 10 grand a year less than anybody else in the team. And I was like, that's not right. So I think the key thing that I wanted to bring out with that example is when you're going to a new firm, it's really, really important that you know the market rate and you don't benchmark, well, it's a bit more than I got before, that's fine. Really look at the market rate for was actually doing. I've got a couple of questions actually about that, which I will come on to when in the relevant question about when they realised that a colleague at an equivalent level, equivalent performance type stuff. So given that what you're actually doing is negotiating a package, what else can you negotiate into a package apart from base pay, and could this be important?
Yeah, I mean, it can't be anything you really want. You've got to know what's on offer from your employee, from your employer. So you consider things like your pension, your bonus, your car, holidays. People often forget. There's other ways the employer can incentivize you, and not just on the base pay. And a lot of this stuff is sometimes it's less costly, direct costs for the business. So giving holidays away. Flexi time's another good one. Again, I think we actually did a lot of research ourselves, and these days, I think millennials especially, they are looking for flexibility and they're looking for choice. So it's not just about the hard cash, the hard base salary. A lot of our candidates that we recruit for are looking for things like study support. That's really important because that is very costly. Gym membership, all those sort of soft benefits you need to appreciate. You could be asking for them. And certainly the bigger organizations tend to have these huge suite of benefits they can offer you. But all too often we get sort of entrenched in it's got to be the base salary. That's kind of what the key thing is, but it's not. It's all the peripheral, as say, soft benefits you need to be considering as well.
And be aware that things like extra holiday or a shorter working week is actually very cost effective in the immediate here and now for an employer. Extra pension, that's going to cost them more money in the short term if there's a cash flow problem. But actually, if they're saying, look, we're on a recruitment freeze, we're having to cut our costs, etc., look for ways that they can give you a benefit without it costing them anything in the short term. Of course, in the long term, giving you shortened hours or flexi time or more holiday is going to cost them. But in the absolute short term, it may not. And I think that's really worth looking at it from their perspective. Now, we've got lots and lots of questions that are all around. We've got, and I think we'll answer them all up. We've got one that is a 20% pay rise, excessive. Would you as a boss ever do that? We've got if somebody else was in the same position doing the same role but on more money, how would you approach the subject with people who sign off for pay rises? We've got lots and lots of questions along that sort of thing. We've got someone says, I found out by honest accident that a colleague at an equivalent level with equivalent performance is earning more. How should I approach this? Use this information requesting a pay rise. I think all of those are probably going to be answered a little bit with what do you need to do to prepare for a pay rise conversation. What's your thoughts, Pat?
So just to go back to the person's question about people on different pay but in the same job, I think everyone is looking for equality at the end of the day. You kind of, when you are negotiating, though, you are negotiating on your part. Again, we get this a lot as business owners saying, look, that person's on X, but there may be other things that person's contributing, as opposed to just say straight revenue or just a certain responsibility. So as a business owner, you'll have to look at the whole business. But when you do come down to actually preparing for your own pay rise, there's a number of things, and this is quite a big topic, so I'll try and keep it condensed. But again, you've got to know your market worth, and by doing that, you'll need to do a lot of research. So you'll need to be looking at salary surveys, You'll need to be looking at things like Glassdoor. It's good to look at the open market. So look at adverts. Look at job boards. What are they paying for your role? There'll always be a bracket there. You can speak to agents. Again, we're very up to date on what is a typical X person worth. So speaking to agents is really, really good. You've got to look at other things as well. So rather than just also look at what is my worth to the outside market, is internally, how valuable are you? So what are your responsibilities? Do you manage people? Are you a business developer? So are you bringing in new business, which is really important for any business, is not just sitting on your laurels and harvesting existing clients, is bringing in new business. That's what keeps companies ticking over. Again, we talked on it earlier. What impact, if you left, would that have on the business in terms of your clients, your team around you, to your boss? Does it put your boss under more stress? No doubt it would. Again, if you do leave, what is the cost to replace you? So will they have to actually pay a higher salary? Will they pay an agency fee? Will there be a lag in deliverables if you're looking after clients? You then also have to look at other things. Is it a candidate-driven market you're in? And a lot of the markets we work in certainly are. If you're a good candidate, you're in demand. And clients know that, because if they are recruiting or have recruited, it can sometimes just be like walking through treacle trying to get that good candidate. So you're in a strong marketplace if you're in a candidate-driven market. Then the other things you need to do is have facts and figures to hand. Again, how much have you made for the company? And we can give a bit of advice here. So if you're in practice, you can work out what you're actually billing out for the business. So you will normally have a charge out rate. Again, a few inside tips here is work out what your charge out rate is, times that by 35 if you do a standard 35-hour week, and then times that by 48 weeks for the year, because you'll have obviously 4 weeks holiday. And that will tell you what your gross revenue you're bringing in for the business. And if you sit and work that out, I can guarantee you're pretty profitable. You need to work out what your recovery rate is, or your utilization rate is, and that's typically, you might take 10% off for administration. But if you do those sort of figures, you are very, very profitable for any partnership, really. So if they were to give you a 10, 15, even a 20% pay rise, they will still be making some good cash from you, without a doubt. So you need to know what you're actually earning the business.
And it's interesting that traditionally, many business models of professional service firms were based on a third. A third would be to pay the wages of the individual, a third would be to pay the overheads, and a third profit for the partners. Have you seen any change in that model? Has it gone up to sort of, you've got to be earning 4 times your rate type stuff, or is it still around that 3 times is the magic number? What's your view, Pat?
So yeah, that is the magic number for any business. If you can have a third. Typically, though, the profits are getting squeezed down, so it's not typically you're not really getting 30% from an individual. It tends to be, if you can get to the 20-25%, that would be kind of the holy grail. But salaries have over the years increased, so typically it's now something like 35% will actually be on staff salary. So it's drifted slightly.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Josh asked the question, which I was also wondering: how do you know if it's a candidate-driven market? How do you actually find that out?
Speaking to your agent, that's the easiest way. But I mean, the clear ways are if you're just seeing tons and tons of adverts for jobs, it's a job-driven market. But your best way is to speak to your recruitment agency.
Yeah, I guess the other way is if you're seeing vacancies in your firm that they're having a really hard time of filling, it's a candidate-driven market. Absolutely. Now we've got a couple of questions around this, but given that we've identified that we've kind of done that calculation, how do you approach a pay rise conversation with your manager? So we've got a few sort of scenarios. We've got someone that says, how do you word that request when you're actually picking up my new manager's slack? We've got a couple that know they're potentially delivering more than a peer and getting paid less. So how do you start that pay rise conversation? How do you approach it with your manager? Where do you go?
Okay. First of all, make sure you've done your preparation. The other thing I always advise is make sure it's done in a professional manner. So always do it in the office. Try not to do it down the pub or at the Christmas party. That's probably the worst time you could be doing when you've had a few drinks. And it happens. You often get collared at the Christmas party or when you're down on drinks down at the local pub. The worst time ever to do it. It might seem like a good time because you've got a bit of Dutch courage. But again, as a business owner, what I prefer, and I think this is what clients prefer, is that you're given notice to your boss to say, look, I'd like to have a formal chat with you about my salary package. So give them notice because, no one likes a surprise. So don't just say, can I have a meeting and say nothing and jump it on to your boss as, look, this is what I want and this is why. Give them advance notice. It just makes for a better setting. It will put you at ease and it will put your boss at ease. So setting out the scenario is the best thing. And then you go through to actually delivering, your request. And this, again, I always say to people, look, be upbeat. This is not a doom and gloom scenario. Sometimes your boss may just think, I've actually overlooked you as an individual, and that's the bad part is. But they realise that, and once you go through your negotiations, it's kind of quite easy, and you'll be very surprised when bosses listen to what you actually say. And if you make a really compelling case as to why, you can be really surprised at the reaction and what comes out of the other end.
I know I had that scenario. I've got someone in my business that's absolutely essential. And yeah, we'd increased her pay over the years and whatever. And I've just not done anything for a while. And she turned around to me and said, look, so-and-so's coming at this. I haven't had a pay rise. I'm like, yeah, okay, right. It was instantly. There wasn't even a discussion. It's going up. So if you make the case really well, then absolutely. Now, given that this is such an emotive topic, and I mean a really emotive topic, how do you keep your emotions in check? The amount of questions that we're getting through says this is something that's really close to everybody's hearts here. How do you keep that in check?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you need to be doing is almost to be doing a dry run in your head before you actually go into that meeting. And again, I always suggest when you go into a meeting and you're negotiating salary is have notes. It's almost like that comfort blanket. Don't feel you go in there empty-handed. So have your notes written down, have your little prompts. Again, I can only strongly suggest be positive, be upbeat. This is not a doom and gloom situation. You're trying to impress your boss, and everyone likes it when it's a slightly higher tempo meeting. So just be positive, think positively that this is going to be a good meeting. It's going to be good for your boss. It's going to be good for you. Because at the end of the day, if you can get a pay rise and your boss agrees to it, he's got an engaged employee. He gets to keep his employee. So it can be a win-win situation. But you've just got to remain upbeat, remain positive. It sounds funny, but think of good thoughts in your head before you go in and when you're in there.
I think it's really worth understanding that your boss's hands may be tied. That I remember when I negotiated my pay rise and said, hang on a minute, I'm way behind the rest of the team. I'm seen as the best performer. I got basically, I think I got the highest pay rise in the company at the time, and it had to be signed off by the leadership team. And to be aware that it might not be your boss that's a sticking point. It might be that actually there's just a company policy at this time. They won't do it. Absolutely. So I've got a couple of questions. So what should you do if your line manager refuses to give you a pay rise? What should you do then?
Okay, well, one thing I would suggest is this should not be kind of a fait accompli. It's give me this or I'm off. This is allow your boss to digest what you have to say. First of all, allow him to go away, maybe speak to fellow colleagues, speak to HR or whatever. It shouldn't always be discussed. You shouldn't have to have a decision or an outcome in that meeting. And again, I think it shows professionalism and it shows emotional intelligence if you say to your boss that this is what I'm looking for and this is the reason. These are the reasons why. Could you reflect on it? Can we have another meeting, or could you come back to me in a couple of days? That's the sensible way to do it, as opposed to put someone on the spot. You do often have to have a backup plan, and that is maybe going to market. That is maybe having a second meeting saying, look, I do think I'm worth X, and if we can't agree this, I need to look at alternatives. But again, try not to make it like it's almost a fait accompli, or it's not even a blackmail. It's too heavy a word, but it's a final solution, because it should never be positioned that way, the boss should always feel there's a bit of wiggle room. But that is a tough one. You will need a backup plan should that not be given. So, but try not to give ultimatums.
Yeah. So what happens if, as Mark's asking you, if you get the pay rise, but it's not quite the market rate you wanted? What should you do now, or should you just be happy for the recognition?
Again, that's very subjective. It depends how much of the pay rise you've been given. But I'm a big fan of, give me targets. If you're not going to give me a 10 or 15% pay rise or whatever it is you're asking, is factor in some sort of way that you can actually get there. So if it is steps, will it have to be a financial target? Will it be winning new business? Managing other staff. So you may get some of your pay rise now. It doesn't have to all be now, I don't think. Sometimes, again, business owners like the fact that, they'll get a little bit extra out of the employee if they give them something now, but they set a target for, 3 or 6 months down the line. That's another nice way to kind of get what you want in a medium to short term space of time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I see, particularly with the work I do with small firms, through the Accountants Millionaires Club, where it's often an underperformer comes in and asks for the pay rise, and the boss is almost going in their head, what on earth planet are you on? We're about to do performance measures, not that type stuff. So I think it's one of the things that you need to know before you go in on this pay rise is actually have done the work to understand how you're viewed, how you're performing. Because if you're not performing and you're not delivering on it's really, really difficult to get a pay rise. And this is, and I see this quite often where you've got people that have maybe got their CTA or now gone from part qualified to qualified. And because a lot of the big firms almost have a lockstep, well, when you qualify, we'll give you this amount. Unfortunately, with the smaller firms, you may not get that sort of lockstep, well, we'll give you an extra amount, we'll give you a bonus, whatever, because they're looking really, really closely about what is the value you're delivering to the business. So just because you've suddenly now become qualified at ACCA, if you're not delivering at the next level, then don't expect to get the pay rise. Don't expect to get the promotion. But somebody's asked the question, and it'll be interesting to know if you're a qualified accountant and then qualified CTA, how much salary increase typically would you expect?
Okay, so if we look at figures, let's concentrate on central London, but this will vary obviously depending where you are in the country. So typically, as a part qualified CTA, your salary will be anywhere up to about, let's say again, if you're a Big Four top 10, anywhere up to around about 33,000. Ever so typical, that's a rough average. On qualification, the Big Four top 10, you should easily go to about 42 to 48,000. So it is a big step. We're talking, what's that, maybe 25% increase in salary. And the reason being, obviously, is because once you're qualified, your charge out rate can go higher. You're then obviously qualified. So you should typically be looking at jumping up a level as well from sort of like either part qualified or qualified to fully qualified. So maybe assistant consultant to consultant or consultant to senior consultant. So you should really expect on qualification a decent step up. At least 20% is very typical in central London. Some firms are very generous though. So even before qualification, they're quite clever now these days. Firms are thinking, look, we need to keep you warm and cozy and fuzzy, and keep you bought in. So firms nowadays aren't necessarily giving that one big lump sum at the end of your qualification. They're starting to give pay rises slightly ahead of the time. So the last sort of 6 months before you qualify, we're seeing the very smart firms starting to just load up your salary because they want to keep you there. They don't, because you're primed for headhunting. As soon as you become qualified, agencies are swarming all over you. So your firm should do well to keep you comfortable, keep you engaged, and again, that's going to come with a salary rise.
I think there's a real differential here between the mid-tier big firms and the little firms around this. And just be aware that the smaller the firm, the more you've got to be delivering on a day-to-day basis before you'll actually get a nice big pay rise because you become qualified, because they just don't have that flexibility. So interesting question that we received right at the beginning. if you've brought in businesses, say 20 grand per annum, how much could you expect to bag as a pay rise if you've gone from actually starting to bring in your own work?
Sorry, if you're bringing in an extra £20,000 of
Yes,
business.
yeah.
Again, we need to contextualise that. But again, this is kind of so subjective. It would be dependent on the size of the firm, how much of that business is profit. So that's a real hard question to answer, I'm afraid, Heather.
Yes, it's one, as you say, it is very subjective, and actually, in those, my view is, if you're starting to bring in work, it depends on the structure and how you're remunerated in your firm, because some law firms and some accountancy firms will pay you a referral fee if it's not part of your job description, whereas actually if it's now part of your job description, your target, of course you won't get a referral fee, but it's all about, as you say, it's all about how your firm is structured, what they value. But it's always worse if you're not a senior manager or above and you brought in a piece of work worth 20 grand to the firm to ask for a slice of it. The only thing they can say is no, and they might even say yes. So, question for you as well. So let's say you go in there, and this is a question from Michael. You make your case, and the manager says, "Well, actually, you're getting market rate for the amount you're delivering." What do you do then?
Well, if you're being paid market rate, then I suppose that the upshot there is they've got a fair case. But again, you've got to build everything around your own case. Market rate is kind of like it sometimes can be like the finger in the air. But if you're delivering above and beyond, then this is where you need to make a strong case, where you've worked out your chargeable rate, you've worked out what you bill for the business. You look at all your other deliverables, your other responsibilities. That's where you make a strong case. If it's compelling, if they need to go above market rate, maybe you are an above market performer. That could be your argument is, well, market rate's 40,000, but I go above and beyond what is expected of someone in that role. And if you lay out your case and it's compelling, why not go beyond that? Again, as a business owner, if someone came to me and made that case and they said, look, I'm going above and beyond, I'm bringing in X, I'd want Y, I'd look at that very, very seriously and probably agree with it.
And I think it's really important that when you lay out your case, you've got evidence. Laying out your case and saying I'm a great manager is not evidence, because that's really, really subjective. If you're going to lay out your case, you need to have evidence, such as someone in my position is not expected to bring work, but I'm bringing in work. I've brought in X amount. Or it could be along the lines of, in our firm's competency framework, the level above, we're expected to do this, this, and this. From the feedback that I'm getting, I'm doing this, this, and this, but I'm at this level. Can we have a conversation? And I think it's really, really important that when you lay out your case, you lay it out in a way that is very, very qualitative as well as quantitative. And I can never say those words because there's too many letters and syllables in them. So next question, Pat, and I realise that you're getting bombarded by questions, so you do really, really well. How do you handle that question? You're talking to a recruiter or an interview for a new job, and they say, "What's your current package?"
Well, okay, first of all, you need to be deadly honest. And this is where, again, sometimes candidates can shoot themselves in the foot. They tend to elaborate a little bit. That's probably the nicest way to put it. So again, as an employer, we'll always look at someone's P60 or P45 for proof. So you need to be deadly accurate with what you're actually on. So my advice there would be absolutely honest. But don't forget, again, add in all of the extras. So it might be things like the flexi time. It might be work from home, your gym membership, your pension. You need to tot absolutely everything up. Some of it's not actually, as you say, quantitative. What is flexi time? How much is that worth? It might be really valuable to you, but you need to throw everything in there. And then again, going just back to your point is when you are negotiating, if you're entering a new firm, is if you are expected to win new business, often we'll get senior managers, directors, or even partners actually stating that they want X% of any new business brought in, and especially if they deliver it, and they also want a percentage if they bring it in, but it's delivered by another department. So that's another important sort of negotiation piece. Is if I do bring in business, what is the slice of that I get? That's quite important.
That's really, really good. So we've got another question. So so you're part qualified or qualified, you get the next level up of qualification, i.e. you're qualified ACCA, now you're a CTA. So you've gone up, but your firm turns around and says, well, actually, yeah, it's great you passed your CTA, but we only give pay reviews in April. What can you do then? Do you just suck it up? Or can you actually do something about that?
Yeah, firms do often say that. You have to wait for your pay review. Again, it's all about making your case, isn't it? Any firm that is worth their salt knows that as you qualify, you're going to be hounded by agencies or directly now. I mean, other Big Fours are going directly to other Big Fours to take their newly qualified. So they'd be quite naive to make you wait that length of time. So what a lot of firms are doing is they now have these mini reviews specifically for when the exam period finishes, because they have to be mindful that you are going to be tempted away. People will be calling you. So a lot of firms have these mini reviews straight after exams. But again, it's down to your relationship with your manager, your worth to the business. And I would 100% always make sure you at least broach it. Again, the worst is they can say no, and you have to wait 6 months or however long till the next pay review. But you've got to be asking the question.
I think there's something here that if your firm is the sort that, well, we're not budging, there's nothing stopping you going and looking for another job. And I've seen quite a few firms, particularly at the senior end, play people's bluff. No, we're not going to make you partner this time. You're going to wait another 2 years at least, and actually, almost kind of go, well, if you want to, you can leave. Guess what? They have left, and they've done very well at leaving. So if your firm is not seeing your worth or being responsive, there's nothing that says you have to stay there. Absolutely nothing that has to stay there. So somebody's asked a question, because we talked a lot about package and it's more than just the money that comes in. What is sort of, for the big firm, what is sort of a standard holiday sort of allowance for a big firm, say a Big Four?
Yeah, okay. Just going back to your first one, I will cover that question about leaving. I always say to myself, if a firm won't budge and they are that sort of stuck in their ways, would you really want to be working for a firm that's that inflexible and that has that sort of stance or attitude? Where they're saying, right, if you don't like the pay, then leave. My view would be, yeah, I would leave then, because I want to be with a firm that's flexible, it's approachable, and they have a bit more of a seasoned head on them. So yeah, I would have a backup plan. So going back to your question about days holiday, typically Big Four top 10, it's 23 days below manager, 25 above. So typically, yeah, you want to be looking for the 23 to 25 region for your holidays.
Definitely. So here's a good question for you from Rebecca. If you're already filling in as a more senior role and it's being acknowledged that you're doing a good job, how long do you wait before asking for confirmation in the role and an associated pay rise?
Again, it's case by case, but it's kind of like as soon as you feel the time's right. If you delivered on a good project, if the results are coming in as well, so they're invoicing and the firm are actually reaping the benefits, the sooner the better. Strike while the iron's hot. Once the project's over and time's passed, people's memories dwindle. So always strike while the iron's hot is my key advice.
And that's absolutely true. Actually, the thing is, when it comes to value, you're actually more valuable when you're able to deliver something. Once you've actually delivered it and the moment's passed and the client project is finished, you're not as valuable then anymore. And I know that sounds slightly counterintuitive, but when there's a client project that needs to be done, you're incredibly more valuable than actually if there isn't that there. Here's a nice technical question for you. We've got, if you move audit manager to senior manager in another Big Four, so if you're in audit and you're at the manager level and you lateral hire to senior manager in another Big Four, what is the percentage increase you would expect?
Let me write the figures down. So typically going to be 50. You're probably looking at the region of between 12 and 20%. Again, it depends on with the big four. You've got, like, for example, Deloitte, you might have an M1, M2, M3. So it depends on whereabouts you are in that manager grade, if you're top end. And again, if you go to S1, which is your senior manager one, but you've got to be looking for, I would say, at least 10%, anywhere between 10 and 18, maybe even 10 and 20% jump from manager to senior manager. And we've seen more as well. Again, it's not just base salary. We've seen sign-on bonuses. That you've then got a company car as well. When you get most big four, then senior manager, the car kicks in, which is worth at least 5.5. You then have the flexible benefits package. So, it's no secret. PwC have their flex bends, which is for senior managers worth around about 12k, as an ever so rough estimate. But on your base, anywhere between sort of 10 and 20% increase.
So Peter's actually asked a question. How do you find out these actual salary bands that you were talking about, these M1, M2, M3s?
Again, you can actually ask whether your firm will actually give you that information. They're not necessarily obliged to. So you could speak to your HR department, or you could speak to your direct line manager. But most agencies, if they've been working with the big four, top 10 long enough, we've had these bandings. We know, and we even know, obviously, when they change, we're privy to that. So again, which is why agencies are worth their weight in gold in terms of speaking to us about what is the pay range and what are the flexible benefits for firms. We have that knowledge to hand.
So Olga's asked, what is the flexible point at 12k you were talking about? So they have within that big four, within PwC, they have a flexible benefits package that in total is worth an extra £12,000 to a PwC person on top of their base salary. So that's what Pat's meaning about that. Got another question from Olga. So if you're going to move to a different firm, can you expect a premium to move, or actually do you just have to take what you can get?
At the moment, I must admit, it's a candidate-driven market in most of the markets we recruit into. Very few firms are going to move you across for the same. But again, it's dependent on the role you're going into, and what is your long-term career move by going to the new firm. But you're always going to get a premium. On how much it is really dependent. But you are in a candidate-driven market, so you should be looking to move for an uplift. Whether that's 5, 10, 15%, it's down to your negotiation, it's down to the firm you're joining, and down to your experience. But you definitely would expect a pay rise without a doubt.
And that's where a good recruiter can earn their money for you as well, because they will do the negotiation on your behalf. Am I right in thinking that?
Well, 100%, because, don't forget also, we've supplied pretty much all of the people that they've probably recruited before. We've supplied them with the current people. So we know where you are in terms of your status and who else they've interviewed and how much those candidates were on. So, we'll have a really good inside track. It's probably the hardest thing in the world if you go directly to a big four, top 10 negotiating, because you just don't have a point of reference. You don't know what is their top end, what is their top end, what is their flexible benefits program, what else could they offer? And that's our job. That's what we do. That's what we're paid for, is to negotiate on your behalf.
Yeah, you kind of know the inside track. So this is the last formal question, but we will still keep answering questions for the next 5 minutes. So to conclude, how do you approach the pay rise? A lot of people have asked, how do you go about approaching that pay rise?
Let me answer that kind of holistically. So I think you've got to prepare. I'd always say there's probably 5 steps in negotiating your pay rise. You've got to prepare. You've got to build your case, and in that comes your research. So get your salary surveys together, visit Glassdoor, look at adverts out there for the typical sort of job that you're doing. Speak to your recruitment agency. They'll give you a good inside track. That should give you a market worth. You then need to look internally. So what's your value to the company? And again, you've got to look at your responsibilities. You've got to look at your projects you've done. You've got to look at your business development. You want to check out and work out what your charge out rate is. So what are you actually bringing in revenue-wise if you are a fee earner to the business? Internally also, you've got to look at the impact when you leave. Okay, so that's really important, because that's where a boss will think, crikey, this guy goes, I lose X amount of revenue. He's looking after these clients. The impact to the business, it might lower morale, it might cause a domino effect. All of that plays on a business owner's mind or a manager's mind, the cost of replacement. You've then got to consider you're an account at short market, so you're in demand. So that's your first thing you need to set out. Your second one is set the meeting. Okay, give your boss notice, give him advance warning, and let him know what you're actually going to talk to him about. Don't just say it's going to be a meeting. Say it's going to be a meeting about salary, and I hope you're okay with that. Thirdly, get your mental state right. So you've got to be positive, you've got to be upbeat, you've got to raise your own internal kind of mechanism and think positively. You then need to actually approach the meeting. So that's where you need to set out your reasons logically, rationally, and don't forget to give your boss the time to reflect as well. And then lastly, I suppose it's kind of like, what is your end game in terms of what is the total package you're looking for? And that's where you need to think about base, your other benefits, your work from home, your flexi hours, your gym, your bonus, your holidays, and can they target you? And then lastly, I would say is again, don't make this a fait accompli. Give your boss or your manager or whoever you're speaking to time to reflect, and do it in a really friendly, upbeat way. That's the best advice I can give.
Brilliant. So let's feel free if there's anybody that hasn't. Well, we've got a few more questions. We've got some nice ones waiting for you, by the way. So I just want to just almost summarize a lot of what we've been talking about. And I think the key messages that I took were, remember that it's about your whole package. It's not just about what lands in your bank account. Next thing is, I think you need to think really, really commercially, because I don't think people think commercially enough when they come to asking for a pay rise. And when you're thinking commercially, you'll understand where the business is, you'll understand your true worth, and that is going to help you actually ask for stuff that you'll get. Because let's just say there's a recruitment freeze on, there's a travel ban on, that is going to be the wrong time to go in to ask for an immediate pay rise. You're never going to get it. Whereas actually, if you go in and say, look, I'd like a pay rise, but I realise that now is not the right time. So can we negotiate a better benefits package that is not going to cost you anything extra at this point in time? And you're more likely to get that. I think a key thing that you've said so many times is take the emotion out of it. This shouldn't be a surprise for your line manager. Let them know before the meeting. Set out a case for why you should get promoted. Really, really think commercially. And don't throw your toys out the pram if they say no. The last thing you want to do is have that career limiting conversation. But at the end of the day, if they are not willing to embrace your value, is that the sort of firm you want to work for? So got a question. We've got about 3 or 4 questions. We'll take them because we've got a couple of minutes. So what happens if your back office, i.e. you don't physically bring in the revenue? How do you actually demonstrate your worth to them in that situation?
Yeah, that is slightly more trickier, but there is a worth attached to you. And I always say the back office staff are the glue to the business. They're the ones who keep things ticking along. Yes, you need your fee earners, you need the people that bring in the revenue, but without that solid support behind you, you're hamstrung, or at least you can't do the work you want to do to the limit you want. So there is a work there. And what I would suggest is you go back to your appraisal and go back to your targets, because even if you're backroom staff, you will still have set measurables and set targets. And if you're hitting those and going above and beyond that, there's, again, absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be entitled to ask for a pay rise. And again, your boss has got to look at what's the impact of you leaving. Will they have to bring someone in? Yes, you're not a fee earner, but they've got to teach you the ropes. You've got to gel with the business. Will you actually be sufficiently right for the job? So there's an impact on you leaving. So if you're a good performer in the back office, you've got just as much right and just as much negotiating power, I think, as anyone else.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, if you know the market rate and you are delivering over and above your peers, or you've got evidence of the feedback that you're getting from your stakeholders across the business and they're raving about you, you're in a really strong position to ask for a pay rise. But you've also got to context it. As a back office, and I've been there, I was a learning and development manager for 4 years for BDO. As a back office, you're never going to be as valuable as a fee earner. So you have to realize that when budgets are tight, it's a lot harder to get a pay rise as a back office person than as somebody that's actually chargeable. We've got a couple more questions. So we've got somebody that's been offered a job elsewhere as a manager with a salary hike, but they actually want to stay with the current team. They're already in line for promotion to manager role, but no timeline on it. How do they broach the subject? She wants to get her existing employer to match the salary and promote her quicker. What's your view on that, Pat? How do you play that scenario?
Again, I'd be really honest. Again, it does come back to your relationship with your manager, and we've had this situation actually ourselves in the business, and I really appreciate the guy that said, look, I've had an approach, and people, we've got to realise, and bosses will realise this, people will approach you, whether it's agencies, whether it's firms directly. No one's going to sit there and completely ignore all calls. So again, as a business owner, if an employee said, look, I've been approached, but I'm happy here, but I want to talk about my pay rise, that actually for me is a good thing. It's positive that they want to talk, they want to stay. So again, just sit down and speak to your boss and put it on the line. Not being disingenuous, you're not being disloyal. You have been approached, and you're entitled to go and speak to people. There's nothing illegal about that in the marketplace. But have that chat with your boss. I think he'll be pleased that you would at least give him that chance to maybe rectify your salary or situation, as opposed to you go, right, I'm off, thanks very much, and here's my month's notice, because that really is a shot in the foot for most employers.
Yeah, I've seen that happen before, where people have been in a similar position and they've gone and had that chat, and guess what? The firm then matched the salary, promoted them, and everybody was happy. So it is just about having the confidence to kind of go, I wasn't intending to move, but I accidentally, answered the phone when I was having a bad day, and before I knew it, I've suddenly been offered another job. Yeah. That sort of conversation, absolutely, if you have it that way, they're not going to think you're disloyal or anything, because it happens a lot. And actually, it's their fault, as an employer. Most savvy employers realise if you've got as far as a job being offered, they've done something wrong in looking after you. And we've got a question here that I think I might be able to pick up. Is having a bigger client portfolio and fee percentage than other managers a reason for a pay rise? And actually, if your pay is under the others, absolutely, because you are delivering more into the business than they are. And that's about knowing about your true worth. So we've got lots of thank yous. I think we've run out of questions. I think we've asked most of them. If we've not answered them, then please get in touch with Pat. His details should be coming on an email to you. But here is his details on the screen. He and his team of consultants will be really, really happy to have a completely confidential chat with you, both on your question about a pay rise, but also about where you are in your career, what's the market out there, are you in cloud cuckoo land by wanting this, this, and this? They'll give you a really, really honest conversation. So I just wanted to say thank you very, very much to you, Pat. I mean, I think you sang for your supper there, didn't you? With all those questions.
They're all very good, and thank you as well. Thank you.
I've learned a lot, really learned a lot from today. So if you've got any more questions for Pat, please email him. He or one of his consultants will pick up the phone to you, and they'd love to both have a chat. So Pat, do you want to say your final goodbyes?
Yeah, first of all, Heather, thank you so much for being a great host. And again, everyone who's attended the webinar, thank you. Hope you found it useful. And as Heather said, don't hesitate to email me or any of our team. We're here to help you guys.
Thank you very much. And hopefully I'll be speaking to some of you in the future.
Good. Thank you. Goodbye.